I should be writing number 370. Interview with the Bookburners. Well, the writers anyway. Hi there, welcome to I Should Be Writing, the podcast for wannabe fiction writers. I'm your host, Mer Lafferty, and I'm back. I finally got all of my old interviews posted. I said I was taking a break from scheduling interviews, which is mostly true, except I had a book come out. I had 2 books come out, but one of them was a collaboration, and so I decided to have my other writers on to talk about collaboration and writing a serial and the stuff we learned. And so that's this episode. I have Max Gladstone, Brian Francis Slattery, and Margaret Dunlap on with me, and we talk about the season 1 of Bookburners, which is out via Saga Press. And my other book, Six Wakes, came out. And it's hard to explain this because I have, you guys know I've always had crippling self-doubt. And I really expected this one to be received poorly. It comes from a disastrous disastrous reading I did at a con right after I sold the book. That was, I can't remember how much I've talked about this, but that was the one where it was a very small, intimate reading, and the group of guys in the audience decided to critique the reading. You don't want to do that. Don't do that to someone's reading. And they pulled apart everything. And so as I was writing it, they were in the back of my head. And then the first review was negative. Kirkus didn't like it. But since then, I haven't heard one bad word about it. I've been listed on Amazon's Best Books of February. I was on another 5 Best Books of February list alongside Neil Gaiman, which is something I wish I could go back in time and tell myself 20 years ago. I found a picture of me getting an autograph from Neil, and it's got to be 20 or so years ago, at Dragon Con. We both look much younger. The difficulty I'm having with this, and I've been trying to articulate it, and I'm not sure I'm there yet, but I'm trying again, is every author has self-doubt. I know that. But there's a difference between self-doubt and really worrying it's not that good. And if really worrying it's not that good is my best received and, I think, most successful book, then how do I find the confidence with my next book if I don't know what's good and clearly don't know what's good and what's not in my own head? Do I do the one that I'm most excited about, or do I do the one I'm not excited about because for some reason that is the one that's going to do well? I don't know. It's strange and weird. What I'm doing now is more proposals, more catching up on podcasts. I have a project I can't mention yet, but I'm excited about. Have some other projects for books I'll be working on, proposals for books that I'll be working on turning into my agent sometime soon. And yeah, that's really what's going on. I've got some travel coming up in February, personal travel, and then in March I am home to work. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about the failures that we have. And this is not in reference to my 2 books that came out. I'm very happy with how they're performing. I just mean, I've been thinking about this recently, how we let the failures get us down. And I realized I've compared this to a boxing ring, where when you go into a fight, you know you're going to get hit. Your goal is to stay on your feet, dodge whatever you can, and get hits in when you have an opportunity. And if someone knocks you down, you get back up. But I realized that for people who prefer a less violent metaphor, that your writing career is an awful lot like a long-term relationship. I was thinking about this in terms of actually doing the writing instead of submitting. But if you and your writing are in a long-term relationship, it takes a little while to get comfortable with the other person, see what works, what doesn't work. And you also have days that will stay with you as magical and wonderful, and you have days where you fight. And I feel like the days, if you've got a healthy relationship, stuff's going to come up now and then. And you fight, and you deal with it, and you move on. And you don't say, well, I had this fight, so clearly it's over between us. You say, okay, well, there was a lower point in our relationship, and hopefully tomorrow will be a higher point. And that's how I feel like bad writing days should be. When you have a bad writing day, well, it's a bad writing day. You don't feel confident about what you wrote. You feel like you went in the wrong direction, whatever. But that doesn't mean you should break up. It doesn't mean you should quit. And on the days when writing feels like super easy, wonderful, awesome sauce, those days also you may have, aren't going to last. Because the peaks don't last forever, just like the valleys don't last forever. And I find that comforting. If I look at a bad writing day not like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst writer in the world, and instead, well, that was a kind of low point. Tomorrow will be better. Let's kiss and make up. I don't know what the metaphor of kissing and making up for you and your writing is. That's a personal thing. But I'm not going to go that long because we have a nice long interview for you. And if you listen also to Bookburners, my other show, it will be, there's a new one coming up where we tackle all the feedback that was backed up. So it's a long one. And, let's get to the conversation with the writers of Bookburners. Welcome back to I Should Be Writing. We have a special interview today because I have on the phone with me all of my co-writers for the Bookburners project. We have Max Gladstone, Margaret Dunlap, and Brian Francis Slattery. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hi, Mer.
So we had a book come out last week, and that was pretty intense.
Yes, really exciting.
Yeah,
that was incredibly exciting. That was my first time I had a book come out,
Nice.
in paper form. So yay.
Yeah.
You can actually, use it to intimidate your friends and neighbors with this enormous.
It's really large.
It really is
really
gigantic.
is.
I mean, I've told a couple of people that they can get 4 of them and then use it to put their car in their front yard.
Yeah.
Put it up on blocks. And
that's very clever. Now you just got us 4 sales.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
4 sales per person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
I've been advertising as an investment in literature and home defense, but actually the final versions are much lighter than I was expecting. Like the paper that they're using is not as dense as the one that's in the ARC, so it's not quite as intimidating.
Right.
Oh, that's bad.
It's fluffy almost.
Our fluffy 800-page
like a meringue.
book.
Our fluffy 800 pages, exactly.
Yes, and it's lightly blowtorched on top.
Urban
to get
fantasy
that nice
meringue.
crisp.
All right, so
Yes.
let's go to our head
I think we
writer.
should have gone to market with that.
Yeah. Let's go to our head writer, Max, and why don't you give us the rundown of what exactly it was we all created?
Fantastic. Well, I'm still stuck in this sort of urban fantasy meringue part. Maybe I just needed to eat more for lunch. So Bookburners is an episodic sort of supernatural procedural series. We have our team of secret agents who are working for the Vatican, running around the world and collecting magic and monsters and stuff wherever it crops up and starts ruining people's lives. And our team swings into action, finds the stuff, grabs it, and then brings it back to the Vatican, where we stick it in a special archive where we never look in the archive again for any reason. And this works about as well as can be expected. And it's really fun to have a bunch of different writers collaborating on this. We have each We have 16 episodes in the first season, and each episode is its own little procedural adventure story. And the characters remain largely consistent from episode to episode, but each writer brings their own style and their own pace and their own sense of drama and terror and humor to the work. So over the course of the story, we get to see a lot of different perspectives on our characters and really put them through their paces. It's an enormous amount of fun.
So, Margaret, your background is not like the other three of us because you are in television, but you were instrumental. Sorry?
One of these things is not like the
yes.
others.
Yes, but you were instrumental in getting us to work together. So tell us the revolution you brought to Cereal Box.
Well, the Cereal Box revolution, it was, I do think, hopefully not the only reason that Julian asked me to participate in the project, but I definitely think one of them was, Margaret, you've worked with other writers when you're all in the same room at the same time before. Explain to novelists how that's supposed to work.
Because we sure as hell don't know.
So we showed up, and I feel like I always tell this story, and someday Julian's going to get annoyed at me for doing this, but we arrive on the first day, and there's a packet of index cards sitting in the middle of Max's kitchen table, and Julian looks at me and says, I was told we need index cards. And I look at the stack of 100 index cards, and I'm like, yes, and now we need more index cards. And he's like, you haven't even taken off the packet yet. I'm like, by the time you're back from Staples, we'll be ready for the next installment. So I do feel like the index card makers of the country acquired new clients.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because of Bookburners. But basically, it's taking the work that I think you or one does when writing by yourself, but finding ways to make that external so that other people can see inside your head. Because, like any relationship, communication really is key.
Right. Brian, you mentioned before we started recording that you've had fun trying to explain this to people.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for every person that I've talked to who says, "Wow, that's really neat that you're doing this collaborative project," there are people who say, "That's crazy that you're doing this collaborative project," and they don't sort of they're people who are writers themselves, and like ranging from nonfiction to fiction to whatever, and they see it as like a recipe for just an incredible amount of arguments, between the other person, the collaborator, and I can see how that would be true. I can see how possibly like you just wouldn't get along with your collaborator in some way. Like you just have some, fundamentally different way of approaching things. But for whatever reason, this team of ours is like really good at collaborating, and I think that we all sort of came to it with the same attitude, which has a huge part to play in it, right? Just that it's been super fun for me to figure out what we can come up with together instead of just, what I would come up with by myself. Like by the time this project rolled around, I was frankly getting a little bit bored with the things I was coming up with by myself. And, this has been really rejuvenating. And because I'm a musician on the side, this has been a lot more like playing music for me, which I seriously enjoy. So, that part of it's been like really, really pleasurable. And there's a lot of fun in sort of basically working with a bunch of other people who are sort of like your best editors, even before this thing gets to an editor, right? Like we get to kick around each other's stuff, and I think that every round we've gone through has made things better. There's never been a time where I felt like something came out worse after it went through us. I mean that's a really positive thing.
I feel like we have, and I don't know if, I assume Margaret can tell me, but I assume not every writer's room has this, but it felt like we all came to the room with respect for everybody else. Not just as people, but I mean as writers. So when somebody else speaks up about an idea, you usually listen. And that helped out a lot.
Yeah, I do think that's key, because like not every writer's room is, happy, collaborative, and functional, and ours really is. And I do think it is rooted in what you said, Mer, the fact that we all respect each other and each other's ideas. And I don't know, Max may have been sitting on this for, years now, but I don't think anyone comes in saying it's like, I have the one true vision for how Burners is going to be.
Right.
No, certainly not.
I mean, to some extent, at least the way that I've written my own books in the past, the idea that I even have the one true vision for what my books have been, has struck me as a little presumptuous. So that like sharing that sense of discovery with 3 other people is really, really fun.
Yeah. Margaret, did you want to say something?
Oh, I was just thinking what Brian said about, he doesn't even know the one true vision of a book that he's writing by himself. And I find that interesting just because there is so much premium, I think, in the television world of having, one person who does know, who can get everybody else marching in the same direction. And it just struck me as an interesting contrast there. But I'm also thinking like, well, if you don't, who does, Brian?
Well, by the end, I guess. But, in the process of putting it together, like, not really, right? There's all kinds of possibilities, and it can go in any sort of direction. And, the fun of writing is in discovering the things that you couldn't have come up with, right away. There's the overall idea that you have, because you were in the shower or driving around or whatever. And then there's the difference of like that granular level of, once you get to know your characters, like they do things that you don't necessarily expect them to do. And like, that's the fun part. And, it's even more fun as it turns out to share that with other people.
And this is true.
Outsource surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like if I'm surprised, then I know that the reader will be surprised.
And this is true, I find, even when you are outlining very carefully. I've sort of become more of an outliner over the course of working on Bookburners and working on other cereal box projects, and it's been great for my.
I'm so proud of you, Max.
I know, right?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, yes, I am not more of an outliner. I have a ways to go.
There's nothing wrong with that. But yes, Margaret, I owe my expensive note card and marker fume addiction to you entirely. You'll expect to be hearing from my insurance company sooner or later. But it's not hurt that sense of discovery at all. With prose fiction, there is this key difference when compared to writing a comic, say, or writing a screenplay, that the whole production process involves these tiny decisions, one after another. Even if you have the story very clear in your mind, even if you think you know exactly what the character wants and why they're going to get it and what challenges they face and how those are going to affect them as a human being and what resources they're going to use to surmount those challenges. When you're sitting down to actually write all of that out in such a way as to make it real for a reader, you're deciding, how many lines of dialogue does this argument take? What does this character feel in response to a particular trick of the light that I might not have outlined? I might have just written it there because there needed to be some beat of silence between one thing happening and another thing happening. So there's still that feeling of exploration inside an outline, and you're still sort of slowly discovering the emergent properties of the work, even when you're working from a really clear guide. And sort of the final product is the only truth in this. At least that's the way it feels to me, that there are so many opportunities for new weird connections to surface. Some of them you might not have even noticed until, years after you wrote the end and sent the text off to the printer.
That was deep, man. I don't know what I can say to follow that. I did want to ask you one question, Max.
Sure.
You were our head writer, and so it was your job to make sure that they all worked together. Like a lot of people, I guess they don't think about television when they ask me this question, but they're just like, aren't you all different writers and don't all the stories sound different? But I knew you were there to make sure at least our dialogue was true to the characters we all were writing. And you worked a lot harder on this than we did because you had to go over all of our stuff too. So how did you approach that?
Well, to start off, it was actually not anywhere near as difficult as I expected because we spent so much time in our first story summit when we all sort of sat together in the same room and started hashing out who these characters were and what their goals were and what their challenges were. Just going over these people. And we all had the opportunity to read one another's work as we were writing through the season. So everybody consciously or unconsciously course corrected. Within that, there's always the challenge of this line feeling off or this line feeling like it really belongs in somebody else's mouth. But there was so much less of that involved than I expected. Everybody pretty naturally matched everybody else's pace. We were really helped in Bookburners by the sort of structure of the thing. The point wasn't so much world building and sort of nitty gritty like magic system gear work as our characters are going on an adventure, and the nature of magic in the series is sort of terrifying and unknown and fascinating, but always outside of the circle of firelight. So the thing that we all needed to be clear on were the characters, and so we spent a lot of time thinking about that. It was, and that vision was always what I was going back to as I was reading through everybody else's episodes, and if a beat felt very wrong, I felt really comfortable speaking up about it, in part because it was kind of my job to, and in part because we'd all spent so much time going over who these characters were and what they wanted that I felt like that was a good sort of repository of truth to go back to. I really like Margaret's point earlier about how much of this is bringing stuff that's inside your head onto a page or a set of note cards or some sort of external center of truth so that everybody can communicate with one another. Because we're none of us telepaths yet, at least.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Give us time.
So Mur and I seem to be syncing up.
Yes.
Now,
we're working on the telepath technology. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, as you were talking, I was remembering that one thing we did at that first story summit that might be useful to writers even who aren't working in this sort of collaborative medium was, as we defined the characters, we stole a technique from the Fate role-playing system for building characters, of making sure it's like, okay, we've got these, 4 or 5 core characters, and we made sure that each of them had a high concept, a drive, and something that got them into trouble. And those have sort of evolved, I think, since those initial conceptions, but it did give everyone this idea of like, all right, we all have a picture in our head of who this character is, and that made sure those pictures were all kind of roughly similar in the broadest terms.
Yeah, something else that sorry, go ahead, Mar.
Oh, I was going to say another thing that really helped with that was we just didn't define people's relationships. We specifically defined how they felt about each other. Because you can't say, like, 2 people are friends. Yeah. It's this person feels exactly this about them, while their friend may feel slightly different in a more mentor way or secret crush way or that kind of way. And that's what really helped me out, really trying to think specifically of how each person saw the others.
Yeah, the uneven relationships were really important for me getting a sense of how everybody fit together.
Yeah,
the notion that,
absolutely.
Yeah, the notion that there's parallax in the way that people see one another.
Yeah, I loved it when we found someone who liked someone else, but that person really disliked the first one.
Yeah.
Maybe just the first one just was completely unaware that they were being disliked, but, I like that person. They're great.
Yeah, in retrospect, it's kind of interesting that we set up this team of people that as like people that I mean, they get along, but there's a lot of friction, for people that have to work with each other all the time.
Yeah.
And they go through so much together. We could have made them a little more simpatico, but at least from where I'm standing, it wouldn't have been nearly as interesting.
But we would have lost all that great drama in season 2.
Yeah.
Or just, I mean, I really enjoy writing dialogue of people arguing. So this was a good fit for me,
We thought Brian was in this project for the monsters. It turns out he just likes to write people arguing.
I love people arguing. I love it when people argue. Yeah.
Well, I think that's part of the nature of the the party-based fantasy story, right? Like you have this group of people, and then the fantasy stuff, the monsters, the quest they have to go on, the big bad, whatever, they exist mostly to apply pressure on this group of people. And then the drama comes from seeing how those people distort or change or come to one another's aid. It doesn't always matter what the bad guy is doing, or that the character, or that the villain have a particularly developed sort of personality or subtle orientation. Like Sauron in The Lord of the Rings is basically the weather, right? The weather is getting really evil.
Hate it when that happens.
Yeah, I know, right? Every once in a while, the weather gets super evil, and then you need to hunker down with your friends and figure out a way to get through the storm.
And then drop a rig into a volcano?
Yeah, sure. That's a great way to get through storms.
I think one thing people don't really talk about in fiction, and it kind of was an epiphany to me, and then after the epiphany it seemed very obvious, but it seems like stories need to have a small conflict that is specific to the character and a large conflict that makes up the story. So Sal has the quest to save her brother, but that's not the focus of every single episode. She has her quest to save her brother on top of the monster of the week or whatever's going on. And I usually find if my story feels weak, I realize I'm usually missing the smaller conflict in someone's life. If I'm missing the larger one, then I don't have a plot for the book. But if I'm missing the small one, then things seem more shallow. So we had to work to make sure that everybody had some sort of weird little conflict going on inside them.
Yeah, I had a moment like that just as I was writing an episode for season 3 recently, so no spoilers. But just at a scene level, I was like, I'd been plowing through the draft and I'd hear this one moment and it just stopped dead. And I could not figure out why, I couldn't write this scene. It wasn't really complicated. And I finally realized it was because it was about our main character watching something happen. Mm-hmm. But she wasn't particularly invested in it. It was just, this is happening and I need to show it through somebody's point of view.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this is just a mechanical scene, and that's why it's so hard, because there's no personal investment in it for anybody right now.
So without a spoiler, how did you fix it? Did you change the point of view, or did you make them more invested, or what?
Well, actually, oddly enough, what I did is once I realized that, I'm just sort of and I tried to find, is there a way she can invest in this? Is no, this is just, it's a kind of mechanical beat, and it's going to be exciting what she's watching, and I don't have any other way to get around it, so I end up just making it sort of, short.
That's the whole, just, skip the boring parts, right? The way to make something exciting is just to skip the boring parts.
Right. So it's how can I better craft this moment? It's no, there's just, anything is going to add, 2,000 words to this, which I don't have, and nobody wants to read. So, sometimes you just have to sort of just power on through.
Well, I mean, I've had similar things at several points through this project where I realized often that the way in is to focus on like you're saying, you focus on the weakness of the character, and that sort of ends up driving the narration. Right, that it's whatever it is that the character is facing, it's been really useful to tap into not like the resolve that the character has, but the fear that the character has, or the uncertainty that the character has. And it ends up, as soon as I get there, I can make the scene work. But you're right that every once in a while it takes some time to get there. Where you figure like, well, I just need to describe, this fight. But it's a fight that, like, you know that you're not going to kill off the character in that scene.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know that the character is going to win, but then you have to remind yourself that the character doesn't know that the character is going to win. And,
Right.
Yeah.
that means that you should write it from that perspective. The character is fighting for their life.
Yeah.
Unless the character knows that they're going to win, in which case the character probably has something else going on inside them.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's another way to do it.
Yeah, there's a scene that I wrote towards the end of season 3 where one character's in a fight that they're reasonably confident of victory, but it's still sort of a thing. And the main character's main feelings, because they're fighting alongside some other pretty like serious badass type of people, are ones of sort of inadequacy and kind of what am I doing with my life?
Do I look stupid here?
Right. Which is admittedly maybe a rare thing to think while you're fighting an enormous tentacle monster, but sometimes these sort of issues crop up in our day-to-day lives, and we just have to deal with them. So, but that's intentionally like a character beat, but it's also partially a sort of humorous beat. It contributes to the kind of lighthearted tone of the series that even in this theoretically life or death situation, the character is really concerned about something that feels a little bit more everyday, a little bit more lived. Douglas Adams does this a lot, and I always love it when it shows up in his books, the sort of moment where where like Arthur Dent's running around trying to get a cup of tea in the middle of the spaceship blowing.
Right.
Because we're not used to the spaceship blowing up. That's not an experience many of us have had, but we are used to like desperately needing a cup of tea in a stressful situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm now thinking it's like, oh, when this comes back to Marco, I'm gonna have to crack that scene again, aren't I?
Yeah.
Nah, I mean,
Possible.
just get out of it as quickly as possible is also always a good answer. I mean, sometimes by sheer fact of paring away unnecessary things, you end up with a scene that works just because it is this beautiful skeleton of scene.
That is true, and actually one of the most interesting exercises I did when I was at film school was in an editing class, like editing, like film editing, not like text editing, where we had been given a bin of dailies for a scene, and the professor would not tell us what the movie was about and would not give a script for the scene and just told us, cut together a scene. And my partner and I, like, we could follow the dialogue, and we put together the scene, and our first draft, it was like 8 minutes long, and it was the worst scene ever. We're sitting there like, how did anybody sit through filming this or writing this, or we don't even know. And then gradually it's like, I don't understand what that line means. Can we just cut it out? And so we cut it out, and then we get, there's this bit where they're at the car and then they wander into the backyard. Can't we just start the scene with them in the backyard? I don't think anything that happens at the car is that interesting. We cut it down to 4 minutes.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, it was this taut, dramatic scene. Like, the performances were better. There was drama in it. And it was like, I would have sworn that a good scene was not in that footage.
Right,
and yet when you cut away all of the other stuff, like, it became more than we thought it could be. So that was a really illustrative point.
That's a good lesson that I've learned from journalism. The whole sort of, your 1,200 word piece could probably be 600.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually, so the numbers get crazy. Like there was one where I made a 600 word piece into a 300 word piece, and I've gotten something down to like 250. At some point, I think you start to, there's a limit there.
you do hit the downward limit. Yeah.
I don't know where it is. Like, I don't know where it is.
Chandrasekhar limit. At a certain point, it all collapses into a period.
Yeah, you just have like or you have like a blank page, right? That's like Samuel Beckett's line. The whole,
right.
The blank page is the perfect one. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of truth to it that like there's usually something you can get rid of. I mean, almost always, really.
Well, and I'll tell my students this, like, cut out the mediocre lines because they're making your good lines not as good.
Yeah.
Like, it obscures the good stuff to have this sort of okay stuff all around it. So, yeah,
Right.
pare that down.
Yeah, I mean, the first question that I'll ask myself going through a text is, what can possibly not be here?
Yeah, I'm the one who writes sparingly, so cutting down to edit my stuff is not a good idea.
Yeah,
Well,
you're...
Yeah.
But it's
that's
hard for
something
me to
that's
actually
really
hit word count sometimes.
Well, but also you end up, like, your drafts end up growing in a really cool and fruitful way, which is something that I've definitely tried to think about as I'm going back into my episodes as well. Like, you're generally moving out of a really schematic first draft into something that has a lot more of a sense of what the characters are and what they're doing and why. It's pretty cool.
With
Yeah,
transitions that are actually necessary.
Yeah. Well, and not to project my own process onto you, but I think in some ways, your first short drafts is sort of, might be one of your ways of kind of outlining without outlining.
Because I hate outlining, yeah.
Because you hate outlining. As many people do. It's kind of hateful.
Yeah.
Oh, it's kind of nice. I'm getting a lot more.
I'm a great believer in outlining, and I would not give it up, but it's hard. I think, when I was starting out, there's this sense of, it's like, oh, I just have to write a 10-page outline. That's got to be easier than a 120-page script. It's like, no.
Oh, God, no.
It's a lot harder.
Well,
but if you do it right, it makes the writing of the 120-page script go like that.
Yeah, I mean, now that I'm doing this more, like, I was working on a short comic outline for a side project, and I spent 2 hours yesterday. This is going to be ultimately like a 12 or 13-page comic. I spent like 2 hours yesterday breaking scenes for it on note cards, and then this morning I spent a solid 4 hours turning that into a 3 or 4 page beat by beat outline. When I'm actually sitting down to write the script, it's going to be a large part sort of inserting carriage returns and putting quotes around dialogue, and that's kind of it. But it's difficult because it's so much more time consuming than it feels like it needs to be. But for me, when I'm sitting down with like the cards or with a sort of robust paragraph by paragraph outline, I get a little bit more freedom to try to do the thing artistically or make the scene interesting, as opposed to just making the scene there so that I can make it interesting later, which probably saves time in the long run.
Yeah.
So, Max, you mentioned other side projects. So, while awesome, Bookburners is not the only thing any of us does, because we're all working writers and freelancers. So, I'll start with Max. Tell us what you work on and how you balance everything.
The how I balance everything is kind of begging the question there, as I see it. You're assuming that I balance anything, but
you hit your deadlines, do you?
I largely hit my deadlines. That's
all right,
true.
Then you balance it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. You're very kind. Let's see. So I have original novels, sort of novel-length fiction that I write, the craft sequence novels, of which I think the next one, The Ruin of Angels, is coming out in August or early September.
Yay.
So I write those, and I write and sort of showrun for Bookburners, and I write also on another Serial Box show called The Witch Who Came In From the Cold. And I've written a couple of sort of separate standalone novels outside of my series in the last year. And
a couple?
Yeah. Well, I guess in the last year and a half. But yeah, I wrote this book that has been called The Highway Kind, and we might be doing a title change on that. That should be out from Tor sometime in 2018 or 19. And then I also wrote a tie-in novel for the Pathfinder role-playing game, which I don't have a publication date on, but I'm really excited. It's like, I don't know, it's undead fantasy lesbian lethal weapon in Egypt, and it's great. It's so much fun, this book. Anyway, so all of that stuff. And I'm probably forgetting a couple of things. Oh yeah, I write video games, sort of choose your own adventure video games on occasion. So a lot of different projects in the fire. All of which is possible basically only because I'm freelancing full time at this point. So between all of those, I basically managed to make it work. But it's a lot of writing, and it requires a lot of time management, which I'm sometimes better at than I am at others. And I kind of overloaded myself last year. But generally, for me, it's a question of what project needs to be written now, and then I'll spend 3 or 4 hours in the morning writing on the keyboard, and I can generally get somewhere in the 3,000-word neighborhood done if I have a general strong outline and a sense of where I'm going. And then in the afternoon, I do all of my day-to-day management projects. So responding to email when there's email to answer, which there almost always is, doing revisions, language passes on stuff, keeping all of the various plates spinning.
All right,
And
Margaret.
that's
Oh,
how it
sorry,
goes.
Max.
That's it.
Margaret, you're next. How do you balance it all? What do you do?
Well, it's a combination of what Max said, of just knowing, like, all right, this is the thing that has to get done first. And so that necessarily moves things up the priority list. And also sometimes means giving myself permission if I've got, 3 or 4 active projects at a time, which isn't unheard of, to say, it's like, okay, today there isn't time for project number 4, so it's just getting put off for 3 days. And I have I use Todoist as my online, like, these are the daily tasks I need to do today, and I really try not to overload that with, these are all the things I could do today, and then I feel bad because I didn't get to all of them, even though they didn't all need to get done today. But really looking realistically at, like, all right, I can do substantive creative work on 2 projects in a day, generally. And so I'll just sort of make sure that I know what my capacity is, and or what my preferred capacity is. And unless there's something, unless there's a raging deadline, just not forcing myself to be like a superhero about it every day. It's like, no, if it can wait until Saturday, it's like, yes, this project will wait until Saturday for me. And then it's just a sort of basically playing mind games with myself. Like, if I'm trying to write an episode of Bookburners and an original pilot that I'm working on, then I might work at the library on one of them in the morning, and then get up, go home, have lunch, and then find someplace different to work on the second one in the afternoon. So it feels like I'm getting a fresh start on the day, even though I'm really not. So that I find really helpful.
What about you, Brian?
So let's see. I'm a journalist and a musician and a fiction writer and a parent. So I think that the time management part of it is mostly about making sure that the time, this is going to sound so dumb, but it kind of makes sense that, like, the time that you spend working is super effective. There's a difference between sitting at your desk and getting all your stuff done, and sitting at your desk and getting a little bit done and then saying, well, I need to check my email or whatever it is. I think that probably the most effective thing I figured out is how to sit down and, like, turn off the phone and, not look at anything, and then not get up until I've done what I need to do.
Brian is the only one of us who's not on Twitter.
Yeah, like, I have no time for Twitter. I have no time for
something.
Twitter. I barely have time for Facebook.
Stay away.
Yeah, because it's not. I mean, I literally just don't have time. It's not the, like, I don't have time for that, like, I'm better than that. It's more like I really don't have time for that. I'm too busy running around and trying to get things done. And between journalism and Bookburners, I mean, one of my mantras for the last couple of years has been, like, nothing organizes your time like a paycheck and a deadline, right?
Yeah.
It's really useful, and it's been, one of the things that I've learned is the sort of, sometimes you have 45 minutes to work on something and it needs to be done in 45 minutes. So you just get it done. You sit down and you do it. And, when your time's up, and you go do the next thing. And I used to think that that's, I mean, obviously there's a limit to that too. Like I can't write 4,000 words in 45 minutes, but I can write 1,000 if I, if I really, really have no other choice. And sometimes that's just what it takes. And sometimes I realize a week has gone by and that's why so much has gotten done. It's because it had to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm at the end of my questions. Is there anything anybody wanted to bring up about advice to new writers or about bookburners that I forgot? Or anything else?
I think that silence is
This is great.
Like when I
Mark.
feel like I figured something out, I'll get back to you, right?
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Need to go up and spend some time meditating on a mountain first.
Yeah. Brian, where can
Just
we
keep
find...
writing. You're probably not doing it wrong.
Yes. Brian, where can we find you online?
I have an extremely static website that has the various musicians I play with and the nonfiction stuff I work for. And if anyone is remotely interested in the journalism that I do, I work for a place called the New Haven Independent, which is where actually the vast majority of my word count shows up.
Okay. And where do we find your books? You have books other than Bookburners.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, they're where you find books, right?
I was wondering if there was like a website with all of your books on it.
Besides Amazon, I don't know. Yeah.
Margaret.
Yes, Mark. Oh, where can I be found online?
Yes.
I do have a website. I am at margaretdunlap.com, to the annoyance, I'm sure, of all the other Margaret Dunlaps out there. I am also on Twitter at SpyScribe. And you can find my work for the small and smaller screens. Besides Bookburners, my greatest claim to fame is probably as a writer-producer of the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. So you can always go and check that out wherever it is at the moment.
Excellent. And Max?
I'm at Max Gladstone on Twitter and maxgladstone.com. That's where the dot goes. And that's that website. You've got all my books and short stories and links to different projects and things there.
All right. And if you want to get all of our stuff, it's Bookburners. It's out from Saga Press now. So thank you guys for all your time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Thank you for listening to I Should Be Writing. Thank you to the writers of Bookburners. It was fun to collaborate with them, and it was fun to interview them. You can get links to all of our books at merverse.com. My new books, Max's books, Brian's books, and we didn't really talk about it that much, but Margaret has done work on TV. Margaret has done work on TV shows you would have heard of, and those are The Middleman and Eureka. So I'll put links to those as well in the show notes. I will remind you, it is award nomination season, and if you do nominate for the Hugos, and you enjoy I Should Be Writing and or Ditch Diggers, consider putting us down. And if you don't, I'm not sure why you're listening, but that's cool too. Let's see, I did buy my book, I did vote for me. Oh, support the Patreon! Yes, support the Patreon. The Patreon is at patreon.com/mightymur. Supporting that helps keep us going, helps with equipment and travel and keeping the lights on. So that is at patreon.com/mightymur. So if you want the free stuff, merverse.com, an awful lot of backlog of podcasts there. If you want the entire archive of podcasts, you can support the Patreon at $1. That's it. But I will see you next time, and until then, you should be writing.